and welcome back to the OperaWire podcast. This is David Salazar, co-host alongside with my brother Francisco. And yeah, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. It's been a busy few weeks since the last episode. It's been a very wild ride, but we've had a lot of interesting conversations, a lot of interesting things happening, and we've also gone to performances since then. So that's been a lot of fun as well. And we got to see the Oscars this past Sunday. It's now Oscar Tuesday, as they would call it. And it
Yep.
was interesting because there was a lot of representation for opera at the Oscars this year. So that was actually really interesting to see.
Yeah, and we got some, closure on the whole Timothée Chalamet situation. Obviously, two opera stars were in attendance, and yeah, why don't you just give us a quick little brief recap of how opera was represented at the Oscars?
Sure. Well, I think we'll start with the red carpet, which is everyone's very favorite part of these awards sometimes. Uh, a lot of people's favorite part of it. We had Sonia Yoncheva, who was there for Rolex. If you can bring that picture up. She was dressed in Oscar de la Renta, and as I said, she was there as an ambassador of Rolex. And so this is the third time that she attends the Oscars as a guest, and she was with her husband Domingo Indoyan, who is the music director designate for the LA Opera. So she was there representing the opera world for the third time, and second time that she goes with Domingo Indoyan. And of course, Ana Maria Martinez was there. If you could pull that one up. She was there with the team of Viva Verdi, and she was wearing Christian Siriano. She was representing the song Sweet Dreams of Joy, which was nominated for Best Original Song. Unfortunately, it was not performed, but she was there representing and, of course, putting her voice to a beautiful song that was written by Nicholas Pike. And the audiences got to hear a second of the song. It was not what they promised, that it was going to be this honoring of all five songs. They basically just put 5 seconds of each song like they did with all the packages, but we still were able to hear her voice in the telecast, if not for just 2 seconds, but at least it was there.
Yep. But
Picture
there
off.
was, but there was more activity, and it was,
Yes.
of course, for those catching up, we all know Timothy Chalamet made some comments several weeks ago in an interview with CNN with Matthew McConaughey, in which he said that he didn't want film going experience to go extinct, basically like something like ballet or opera, because no one cares about those art forms. And he then doubled down on his situation by saying that he lost 14 cents of viewership and then mocked an opera voice. And the opera world, just, and the ballet world really went after him, and it became kind of this tidal wave where it reached into popular culture. People were
Yeah.
talking about it. People were, and SNL made a quip about it and compared Timothy Chalamet's Ping Pong movie, which is also obviously that was also kind of part of the joke. And look, before we close off, before you kind of recap how the Oscars addressed it, I just, because I've seen a lot of quote unquote hot takes, and I've seen, the New York Times posted an article about maybe he was right. I think we need to clarify something because people seem to be missing the point. Opera and ballet are a niche. They are niche art forms, and I think we can all agree that we're not possibly not in the collective popular consciousness the way that other kinds of music or art forms are. And opera and ballet are not the only niche art forms, by the way, right? I think we can point to a lot of different other kinds of arts that are in the niche. The problem wasn't his point that filmmaking and movie going to theaters could be a niche and that he's scared of that. And it could very much become a reality soon because of streamers and viewing habits and how they've changed, especially in the post-pandemic world. The problem is his choice of words. The problem is that he said that no one cares. The problem is that he doubled down and said he lost 14 cents of viewership. And then the problem is that he himself recognized he was taking shots for no reason. And then he mocked an opera voice. Words matter. When you have a platform the size of his, when you are an actor that claims that he wants to be the greatest of all time or whatever, you speak like an athlete. When you want to put yourself on a pedestal, you want to be a role model. Your words carry a lot of weight. And I think If he had just said, I don't want film going in the theaters to become a niche like opera and ballet, this is not even a conversation. He would have saved himself a lot of grief, but he chose to double down and use words that were insulting and inappropriate, and quite frankly, as I've said in the last episode that we spoke about this, ignorant. So it's not a hot take to say he's right. In theory, he's right. The problem is he was wrong in how he expressed himself. And again, I go back to words matter. What you say matters. When you have a position of power, when you are, whether you're a famous act, the world's most famous, popular, bankable actor, or the president of the United States, words matter. What you say matters, and how you express yourself matters. Because everyone today has a platform. Everyone today can go online and write and insult and trash and say whatever and lie and make up, AI videos. Words matter. How we express ourselves matters. So that's, I just want to kind of put a button on that situation, because I think that people kind of miss the point about why everyone was so up in arms and angry about it. And I love that the Oscars took it and they ran with it.
They did. In the opening monologue, Conan O'Brien took a big jab at Timothée Chalamet. It was actually the first joke of the evening. He basically said security is extremely extreme tonight. I'm told there's concern about attacks from both the opera and ballet community. They're just mad you left out jazz. Obviously, my delivery isn't quite as good as Conan's, but it was funny, and the camera immediately went to Timothy and to Kylie Jenner. They also made a joke about the introduction of the bum drum, which was basically like a butt, and then with a mallet with a ping pong
Which is
racket.
a reference to a scene from Marty
Yeah,
Supreme.
from Marty Supreme, as part of a new instrument for the orchestra. So it clearly was, they were clearly taking jabs, and there were also other people who took jabs at him. The winner of the short film The Singers kind of also took a jab at singing and arts. And then there was another person who won for Two Strangers Exchanging Saliva, who also took a jab at the opera and ballet comment uh, during his acceptance speech. So it was present throughout the entire ceremony. Of course, his co-star Kevin O'Leary, who stars in Marty Supreme with him, did say that he's a great guy. His mother he's really nice. The whole thing about opera, by the way, I just put $1,000 on Kalshi walking in here. And he said basically he's going to win because I know the voting stopped long before that controversy happened. That kid is great. He took a bum rap on that. By the way, he gave a lot of promo to opera and ballet houses. Well, obviously his quote that was during the red carpet, Kevin O'Leary obviously was wrong. He did not win Best Actor. Michael B. Jordan won. And of course, so the whole thing ended up just like I said in the last episode. He lost to Michael B. Jordan, and I think it has nothing to do with the opera and
No,
whatever.
it doesn't, because the voting did stop
The
literally
voting did
hours
stop.
before the controversy started.
Right, and
Hours after it started.
I
Yeah.
think it had to do more with people were just tired of his campaign, overexposure. That's and I was reading a lot of things. So the opera and ballet community, yes, it helped us, the opera and ballet community, because there was a lot of outpour at the Seattle Opera with their 14% discount, the Hawaii Opera Theater, uh, Lyric Opera of Chicago also doing like a campaign, and all these opera companies, the outpour of support and releasing videos and statements, which is wonderful to see, and really wonderful to see how united the community could be when their entire community is
To
attacked.
that point, on his red carpet interview, Josh Groban was actually asked about this, and he didn't take any shots at Timothée
No.
Chalamet. He was very classy, but he did
Yeah.
say it was beautiful to see how it galvanized the opera and ballet community, and it kind of put a spotlight on those art forms. And I think that's also the big takeaway for me from this whole situation was people, when you say no one cares, you forget that opera audiences and ballet audiences are the most like passionate fan bases. People travel around the world to see their favorite singers. People, like it's intense. Being a part of it, you realize how much people do actually care. They probably care more than they do, like, the people in other art forms are, it's like a rabid sports fan base, it's like
Yeah.
that kind of intensity around opera for the people that do care. And sure, it's a niche, but the people that are part of this niche really, really care, like, it's their life. We grew up with a father who's like, so much of his identity is around passion for opera. So I think that's where Timothée Chalamet really, like, missed the mark, but Josh
Talking about
Groban.
Groban, talking
Yeah,
about Josh Groban, well, he's trained classically, and he had a moment at the Los Angeles Masters Chorale, during the opening monologue as well, where he did like this very interesting arrangement of Zadok the Great by
they're pretty
Handel,
they're pretty
and which was a lot of fun. And it was also kind of representing the classical music world once again, and another moment where I guess classical music got a moment to shine
well,
during
also
the
yeah, and also it was because Conan Bryan was talking about if he'd won the Oscar, how his acceptance speech, and he just made it this big, lavish, operatic kind of scene, it was epic, it was operatic, it was larger than
exactly.
life, it was perfect. And then, then Missy Copeland stole the show, I think.
Yeah, I mean, she did. I wasn't. I had a lot of issues with that performance because of the camera work. It was so bad, the camera work, unfortunately. But I mean, yeah, it was a really wonderful celebration of sinners, and it was a wonderful celebration of all different types of music, because that's what that film is about. It's a celebration of music. It's a celebration of Black culture as well. And it was wonderful to see all these artists come on one stage and perform this incredible song. "I Lied to You." It didn't win, but opera was also represented in another film, The Singers, which we were actually just I had just mentioned, and actually I watched it last night in preparation for this episode, and the whole big reveal of that film is actually
Don't spoil, no spoilers, no
has to
spoilers.
do with that. Uh, Tenor Matt Corcoran is in the film, so congratulations to him for being in that film. It's a wonderful small film. It's a wonderful short 18-minute film. Watched on Netflix. It's really fun to watch. And of course, Viva Verdi, it didn't win Best Original Song, but it was nice to be able to see that, an aria was nominated this year. And to see that classical music continues to have a seat in Hollywood, as we've seen many years in past with Maestro and Tar, and other films, of course, Amadeus being the big winner a few decades ago. But it was nice. It was nice to see that, and I think it was great to have opera in the forefront. And hopefully, the conversation does continue about how the arts are all interconnected and how the arts should be working together. Because at the end of the day, the arts are what uplift people, and that's what and I think that that's where the conversation should go next. And Timothée Chalamet is already promoting Dune Part 3, so good luck to him. We're very excited for that film.
Yeah, yeah, and now that we kind of put a bow on this situation that kind of I think took over the opera world by storm. In the midst of all of this, there was a lot of season announcement. There was a lot of big news. There was, the Met reopened its season. We were in attendance at Tristan and Isolde, and I just want to kind of air it out because I think is important a topic to talk about. This Tristan and Isolde performance was huge for the Met. The production of a 5-hour evening was so sold out and so well sold that they had to add an extra performance. And this was news last week. I mean, sorry, 2 weeks ago before the production opened. But what I found particularly alarming was that one day before the production opened, the New York Times, which for all intents and purposes is probably one of two or three publications that Peter Gelb opens his heart to, um, released an article that's title was "The Met Opera's Desperate Search for Money." And in that article, Peter Gelb is depicted as having begged Elon Musk basically for money. And while it does kind of offer up a lot of other initiatives and things that he's trying to do to kind of put the company in a better light, I think what the big takeaway from the article, aside from a very negative title, because I mean, when you use the word desperate, search for money, I mean, you can't possibly see that positively. But we all know how much the world loves Elon Musk right now. How everyone feels indebted to His Highness, the richest man on the planet. So Peter Gelb going and asking him for money to basically help, be a partnership in the space expedition to Mars and put an opera on Mars. Um,
Which is like a joke, I think.
well, but the fact that it's even in the article, the fact that he's begging Elon Musk for money is not a good look. But I thought what was even more problematic was I forget the reporter that was quoted as basically saying that it's time for Peter Gelb to resign and for his head to be basically just asking for his head at this point.
That was Anne Midget, who is the former Washington Post reporter.
Right.
I think the thing with that article is that it comes in the midst of so much negativity and so much of this galvanizing, of opera and everything like that. And I think it just was a bad look for the New York Times, and we should be celebrating in this moment. Tristan and Isolde was a huge hit, is a huge hit because it's still playing at the Metropolitan Opera, and they added one performance, which is unheard of. I mean, you've done it with
Well, and that's
Macbeth.
also, I'm sorry, it's coming in the midst of a season in which they added a run of the Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay, which they
Exactly.
never do. And we're starting to see some turnaround. Look, I have my criticisms of Peter Gelb and his management, and I also agree with Anne Midget, but I can't overlook the fact that maybe there are some positives and there are some changes and there are some attempts to try and make things better. You also have to look at the fact that ticket sales are up slightly from the first half,
Yeah.
right? And so there is good news around the Met. Now, I'm not saying it's perfect. And again, Peter Gelb feeds into that because he's constantly talking about how there's no money for the arts and all these things. He's always complaining about money. But at the
Who
same
isn't?
time, at the same time, um, he has, there are some positive things. And this Tristan and Isolde was something to celebrate. It was huge. I mean, again, a 5-hour evening. Wagner was one of the most complex composers in a really complex opera. Um, it was doing super well at the box office. And New York Times opted to run this story one day before, almost if trying to like shift the public attitude in a certain way, skew it before the performance. I don't necessarily, I didn't really like the timing. I thought it was a little bit in bad taste. Um, and
Well, in the
I
midst of the whole controversy too, I didn't find it interesting either.
Of course, because everyone's also, everyone's kind of, there's a positive energy around opera at that point too. And this kind of like, this was kind of a wrench. It was counterculture. And New York Times also published an article about, from the ballet perspective, about whether Timothée Chalamet might be right as well in the midst of this controversy. So I don't want to project my thoughts fully, but the timing was questionable, right?
Yeah.
Um, what was good about all of this is that the Monday that Tristan and Isolde finally did premiere, I think we could all, at least from my perspective, I think it was valid to say that we can move on in a way. The opera really took center stage and, in my opinion, really delivered beautifully in many ways.
I think that, the last two experiences I've had at the opera have been full of energy and full of excitement. Washington National Opera reopened as well at Listener Auditorium, so that was also a moment of celebration. And I've never seen an opera audience go so give a standing ovation to Francesca Zambello and to Timothy O'Leary. They clearly loved the fact that they left the Kennedy Center. There was energy in that room. There was excitement, sold out performances of Treemonisha by Scott Joplin. It was a wonderful discovery. Great cast. Denise Graves delivers a beautiful production, very simple, very but perfect for what was doing. It was a celebration of music. It was a celebration of art. And then I go to Tristan and Isolde a few days later, and it was a celebration of music. And I had some qualms with the production, but I also understood it by the end, and I found myself to be really just captured by the entire third act. And of course, the singing, Lisa Davidson and Michael Spires, I was captivated by both of them. And of course, Ekaterina Gubanova, Ryan Speedo Green, I had some issues, but his final third act I thought was beautiful. And Tomasz Konieczny, also wonderful. So, I think that these last two experiences at the opera have showed us that the audience is craving for great performance, good music, great productions, and just in general, just an all-time good time to go see the work, as you said, that they're passionate about, works that they're passionate about. And Tristan and Isolde brings out a completely different audience than your Verdi operas or your Bellini operas. And Treemonisha, I think people were discovering it for the first time, and I think that that's something to also applaud the Washington National Opera, because I think that I think it's really important. I for one, I want to experiment and want to see different things. I have my favorites, but I also think it's really important that audiences are given something new. And I'll be going again to go see The Crucible, to go and experience this other work that's rarely performed with another stellar cast, Janai Bridges and Ryan McKinney lead that. And it's a great play. So I'm hoping that this is equally an opera that I enjoy.
Yeah, and if I may just kind of point out, because prior to Tristan, I actually flew to Miami for a day to see Turandot at Florida Grand Opera, with Alexandra Kurtzak making her debut in the title role, and Roberto Araña obviously a Calaf. Um, yeah, the audience was also very emotionally receptive. It was a almost sold out house. Beautiful performance, production, everything was great. What really stood out to me was, I think this is the first time that I've been in a situation, at least in the United States, because obviously I've been to the opera house in Spain, I've been to an opera house in Colombia, where, it was Spanish language is ubiquitous, right? And obviously in Miami it is too, but I think it does come a little bit as a culture shock too, to be in an opera house and to just hear people speaking Spanish all around you. It's not something that you'll associate necessarily with Latin American culture in the United States, but I'm very happy to have been able, and it gave me some pride, a lot of pride as a Latin American, to be in a space that I love, where, in New York, you don't get that experience a lot. New York, it's not a big, and New York has a massive Latino population, but it doesn't necessarily translate into the opera house. But there in Miami, it was really wonderful to hear the Spanish language around you in this space. And not only the Spanish language, like a lot of other kinds of languages, but I was particularly kind of zoning in on that. So it just goes to show you that, obviously opera has a massive reach all around a very diverse country like the United States, and it can be inclusive for everyone, and it can bring and it can be attractive for different people and different cultures. That audience was very, very excited and very happy. Alanya didn't have his best performance, but Nessun Dorma came around, and again, he didn't necessarily have his strongest performance, but that audience was really excited for him. They really they were very enthusiastic and enthralled when he finished the high note at the end of the aria, and he delivered at the very end of the opera. It was his best singing, but the audience stayed with him. They were there. They pulled him up. That's another thing that I think we kind of forget about as an audience, because there is a tendency of we tend to spotlight audiences that boo or that jeer or don't applaud because they're very demanding. But you also see the other side of the coin a lot, where audiences, again, I go back to the sports metaphor, because of course fans can boo their team when their team's not playing well, they'd be upset, but then someone does something heroic in the moment and the fans get behind that. And the same thing with the opera audience. I felt that kind of energy, where they saw that he was not having his best night, but he was still really pushing, not that's the wrong word from a vocal perspective, but he was really working to deliver for the audience. He was still there. He was fully engaged, and they appreciated that, and they lifted him up, and then it resulted in him stepping up in that final act and delivering his best singing. So, I'd also want to remind you, like, the live performance, that's the beauty of it. It's a communal experience in which the performers give and the audience receives, but the audience also gives and the performers also receive. And we tend to forget that in all of this. That's why the like live performance is also so important and so beautiful, because it's a true communal experience. Um, again, just to I know we keep going back to the Timothée Chalamet thing, but for people, for a lot of people, live theater and live performance is a religious experience. It is something that they congregate around emotionally, spiritually. Tristan and Isolde is an opera. Yuval Sharon in his director's notes, which I don't particularly love, but the one thing that was interesting about his director's notes was that he mentioned that Wagner didn't even consider the opera as the word as an opera. He considered it as action, the German word for action, and he questions whether Tristan could even be seen as an opera. And to that point, he decides to kind of establish it more from a ceremonial perspective, more from a ritualistic standpoint. And I think that there is something ritualistic and communal about going to the opera and experiencing it in this way. And it is ultimately about community building. It is ultimately about bonding with people that maybe we don't necessarily will never know and will never engage with, but together we will have that collective experience that will connect us all in some way. And
Right.
that happens at the cinema too, by the way. But I think it's obviously very different when it's a transmission of energies from audience to a constant transmission of energies between audience and performers. So yeah, just to close it off for me, that Tristan experience was absolutely beautiful. I also have my comments with the production. You can go and read my 6,000 plus words on it if you want. Uh, you can skip through my notes on the production and just read them on the singers, or you can do vice versa. Or you cannot read it if you don't want to, if it's too long. But
No, they want to read it.
but I think that it was a beautiful experience, and I'm gonna actually be seeing it again on April 2nd, so I'm looking forward to that. And coming up, you're gonna be seeing Madame Butterfly at the Met. And yeah, there's a lot of opera experiences to be had in the future. So it's been a ride. It's been a crazy few weeks. I feel like now we're gonna kind of shift. I think our last episode we promised we would talk about season announcements. I think we're slowly gonna get back into that. Because there's a lot. There's a lot.
Yeah, no, we'll definitely talk about season announcements, and hopefully we have some new guests coming up as well, that we'll reveal very shortly. But I think it has been a very wild ride, since breaking this story. It feels like it's been years, but it's only been a few weeks. I'm just happy to see that the opera world is in a good place. I'll never forget the energy of these two last performances. I think that is what I go to the opera for. I go because regardless of whether I love it, I want to hear how incredibly happy the audience is. And seeing full houses 2 times in a row, that is motivating. And that tells me that the art form, they're slowly getting back. It's going to take time, but I think you can sense that there is a growing enthusiasm for this art form, and the only thing you can hope for is that it continues to grow. And we will talk about some of the other major news, like the Kennedy Center, which just announced it's closing for 2 years again in a coming, and we'll definitely talk about some
Because of
other
the
things.
playing performances coming up.
Well, yeah, we'll also talk about some of the other controversies that have happened in Europe as well with the Teatro La Fenice. And oh, it's been a wild ride, and of course, the new seasons we'll definitely talk about. But I think it was really important that we just gave a space for just to finalize, and of course to summarize the Oscars, because I think it was a beautiful moment for the classical and opera community. So
Yep. All
thank you
right.
so much.
So, anyways, as always, you can follow us where, friend?
On Facebook, Twitter or X, and Instagram, and where you follow and listen to us, and where you listen to your podcasts on Spotify or Apple, or watch us on YouTube.
And of course, you can read all of our latest news, updates, interviews, reviews, special features on operawire.com. We're very grateful for you guys, the time that you're giving us today, and we'll see you at the opera.
Thank you.